Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of History You Didn't Know But Should. I'm Ray.
And I'm Chris.
And today we're going to continue in our series on the wives of Henry VIII. And we're going to be looking at wife number 4, and that is Anne of Cleves. And we've looked at Catherine of Aragon, we've looked at Anne Boleyn, we looked at Jane Seymour, and each of them sort of have a different story, a different relationship with the king, maybe. Now we come to Anne of Cleves, wife number 4, like I said, and this one is very different. When we talked about Jane Seymour, we talked about how Henry loved Jane Seymour. That's not going to be the case with Anne of Cleves.
By far, it's not the case. And, you have to understand, we know that wife number 3, Jane Seymour, was the wife that Henry VIII loved. I mean, he loved her so much that he buried her in his own grave. I mean, that's how much love he had. And not only that, but after, her death and mourning, he mourns for 2 years. And as he mourns for 2 years, widowhood does not do good for Henry VIII. He becomes obese. He gets diabetes. He has gout. I mean, he is just a wreck of a man. And then, after 2 years, he's like, okay, I got to get back out there in the dating field. I gotta go do it. And I'm ready for it. Go find me a woman. And here is where, Ray, I think that we have the first edition of what in our society today we might call Match.com, Tinder, Farmers,
eHarmony,
all of these different dating apps that people are so fond of nowadays. I think Henry VIII, he created the very first dating app when he said, go find me a woman and let me swipe right or swipe left or whatever it is that they do. And that basically is what's going to happen. And in addition to that happening, he also gets catfished using one of those new terminologies that's in our society today.
I'm going to let you explain what catfish means because I don't know what catfish is. The only catfish I know is catfish you eat in a seafood restaurant, and I like that. So, but I got a feeling this is something very different. Henry VIII is back at it. It's been several, at this
2 years.
A little over 2 years since the death of Jane Seymour. And you talked, Chris, at the end of the last episode about maybe some of the reasons that it took 2 years for Henry to move on. One, of course, is, maybe he had that affection for Jane Seymour. But another, Chris, is that when he does decide to pull out one of his old pictures and create his eHarmony account, not showing what he looked like at the time, no doubt, things are not as easy for him. I mean, like you said, he is older. He is very obese at this point. He is not in good health, and he has a bad reputation. I mean, this would be wife number 4. Women are not lining up to marry King Henry VIII and potentially be the next Anne Boleyn, whose head rolls off their shoulders. They're not lining up for this. To make matters even more complicated, it seems at this time, Chris, he's wanting a Catholic wife, which is interesting because remember, to marry Anne Boleyn, what did he do? He separated England and the Church of England from the Roman Catholic Church and placed himself at the head of the Church of England, what can be known as the Anglican Church. So now the head of the Anglican Church, Henry VIII, who did the great divorce between the Catholic Church and the Church of England, is now wanting, initially maybe, a Catholic bride, a Catholic princess. But it is Thomas Cromwell who steps in and says, no, you need a Protestant wife.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's going on in this is world affairs. England is kind of getting kicked to the side when it comes to France and Spain. And, Henry is finding himself wanting to that God, glory, gold kind of theme that is out there. And he's like, okay, so I've got to form an alliance that will help England, because you start looking at Spain that is getting pretty popular, and then you look at France. And so what he's trying to do with this fourth marriage is to strike some kind of balance. So it seems that the enemies of England might not join forces against him, as you mentioned, in the form of papal supremacy. And so he's thinking, okay, if I get a Catholic wife, I'm going to look pretty good by these people, because I'm kind of, hey, maybe I made a mistake back then. It's all done in the past, but let me come back to my Catholic roots somehow. And so he begins this search that you might have. And that's what it basically is going to be, is that King Henry is going to get his advisors together, and he is going to go forward and say, I need you to go and negotiate my next wife. And here's my standards. Here's my expectations. Here's what I'm looking for. And so as he's talking about all of these things that he's talking about, he also at the very end says, I've got high standards. She's got to be good looking. She's got to be physically attractive. So go out there and you find someone who matches when it comes to my ambitions as far as global supremacy, my relationships with the Catholic Church, but you will not negotiate with a woman until you make sure that she is good looking. And he basically is adamant about that she's got to be good looking in addition to all of the other things. And Ray, the ambassadors who have to go do this, they're put in a very tough position. And it's really hard. I mean, it's not like you're going to show them, use the internet and send back what you found. They've got a tough job ahead of them.
Yeah, and they're actually going to paint a picture of Anne. We're sort of getting ahead of ourselves, but there's actually going to be a painting commission of Anne sent to the king, I guess, sort of to maybe get his swipe right or left, whatever it is. But at any rate, they are going to be sent out on this mission to try to find a wife for the, let's say, not so attractive King Henry VIII. On many levels, not so attractive. And it's going to be difficult, because it's not just simply, okay, the king wants a wife, we got to find someone who's pretty, we got to find someone he can get along with. There's also those political considerations. You mentioned some of that, those political considerations, the religious considerations, all these things that have to be brought into account. And there's several women who are going to sort of be in the finalists, but ultimately it's Anne of Cleves, who at this particular point in time was 24 years old. And she was well educated in some ways, not well educated in other ways, maybe a little, sometimes I sort of got the impression when I was researching her, maybe sometimes a little sheltered, a little naive, maybe as to some things. But this is the woman who ultimately they pick out for her, and they send a painting back of her, or what she's going to look like, to sort of get the king's, I guess, approval on this. And then she's going to make the trip to England to meet King VIII.
And I think it's interesting that they don't just send back the portrait of Anne, that they actually send back 4 portraits, and it's kind of like you imagine that these ambassadors come back and say, door number 1 we have, and the first one was this French princess whose name was Marie de Guise, or I'm messing that name up.
I wasn't even going to attempt to pronounce that name. That's why I sort of skirted over it.
Yeah, so I mean, they got it's got her, and then they've got Christina of Milan was another one. But Ray, before we get to Anne, I think it's so interesting that they bring these ambassadors, bring back these portraits, and they have to give detailed descriptions. I mean, they have to be very specific about what each one looks like and all of their things. And I think it's interesting. Marie she chose the Scottish King James the Fifth. And so she's knocked out of the loop. So now we're down to three. And so Henry says, okay, well, that didn't work out. So I'll go to the second one. And that was actually Marie's a younger sister. And the younger sister says, no, thanks. She gets engaged to somebody else. And then there's the third one, who is beautiful. She's intelligent. It's Christina of Milan. She is comes from a very wealthy family, very rich family. The problem is she's only 16. And you got to imagine, this girl is drop dead gorgeous, right? I mean, they bring back her portrait. But the King of England is 3 times her age. He's fat. He's got a cruel reputation. And she's like, you can paint my portrait, but that is a strong capital N, capital O. I will not find myself with him. And, there's reasons for that. She was also the great niece of Catherine of Aragon. So I think she kind of knew, I know what you did with, my aunt there. So great aunt. So no, thank you. And so you've got years passing by with no alliance. And that is why Henry wanted, a marriage. And Henry wanted the marriage for an alliance. Remember, he's already got a kid now who's a son. So that's taken care of. He feels good about that. So now he's looking at that going forward. And so now it's basically the fourth choice, if you will, the fourth one, who is the last one, kind of gets picked in kickball. There's a reason that they get picked last in kickball. King Henry VIII, the last one that gets picked to be his fourth wife, is kind of the last one. But he has hired this German artist whose name is Holbein, who has been trying to do this. And Ray, he has presented a difficult task, and that is to paint the beautiful picture of Anne of Cleves and to send it to King Henry VIII for his approval.
And Henry's going to get the picture, as you said, and then he's going to meet Anne. What is his reaction when he looks at this, not a picture, this painting, this portrait, and then he looks at his new, at Anne, when he actually looks at her? My understanding, and I don't know if this is totally accurate, my understanding is that he didn't seem to, I don't think Anne sent off the bells and whistles, but at the same time, he didn't seem to make a big deal out of it. Am I right?
Yeah, and it's interesting if our listeners go and look up Holbein and Anne of Cleves, they'll look at the portrait, and what the painter does is he spends the majority of his time, if you look at a painting, what's the biggest part of the painting is kind of where you are to focus. And the biggest part of the painting or the portrait of Anne of Cleves is what she's wearing. It's the gown, it's the jewelry, it's all of these things. Her facial features are lost because your eyes are drawn to the beauty of what she has on. And there's this rumor, I don't think it's true, but there's this rumor that when King Henry VIII takes the painting or the portrait and he sees the real life, he becomes so ticked off at Holbein that he actually fires him and kicks him out of the country of England and says, you can never come back here because you've deliberately duped me with this false portrait. I don't think that's true, but it is true.
Well, if he did get mad over the difference, the fact that the painter didn't lose his head or end up in the Tower of London tells us he didn't get all that mad about it.
And that reminds me of the story I need to say, because it was Christina of Milan, like the third choice down, right? Who was told, hey, King Henry VIII's interesting in you. Would you be willing? And she offers this quote, and I'm not going to be able to quote it. I'll just paraphrase it. But she said something like, you know what? If I had 2 heads, I'd marry him, but I only got 1 head, so I'm not going to be interested in him. You can just move on. I thought that was pretty funny, because
go ahead.
Just rumors had gone all across the world. They knew what this guy was capable of. And, another one thought, that maybe he had ripped out, as you said in the last episode, the baby King Edward at the time. And so they were like, no, I don't want anything with that. So I just think it's funny that here's this guy, who is just weird, but all of these ladies are just like, no, thank you. And she finally arrives. And some people say that the reason for her appearance when she shows up was because she had been seasick, because it was such a bad travel. That's why when she comes off, she looks like if you've ever been out to sea, you can get seasick, you get pale, you kind of get like really messed up. And that's what some people thought she looked like when they came over. So can you imagine? Here's Henry's ambassador saying,
Ta-da!
here she is. Congratulations.
Throw up on his shoes.
I hope you like it. But you're right. He really doesn't say much, except he tells Cromwell something like, well, she's not like what was reported, but okay. I mean, here we are. Let's do this thing. And they get married.
Bless his ambassador's heart, when they were transporting her to the palace and on the journey, they tried to teach her some games and stuff that Henry liked. They tried to sort of get her interested in things that Henry was interested in, and it didn't go well.
Yeah, you got like a 2-month cruise, and I got to train you to be the best wife that you can be to this man. This is going to avoid you having your head chopped off or having a baby snatched out from your womb.
She ain't interested.
And she's not interested. But what's interesting is that Henry is so obsessed, I think, with this global supremacy, or the fact that he's going to get left behind by France and Spain and even Germany, if you think about it, that he's like, okay, well, I kind of got to do it, and I'm just going to marry her, and everything's going to be okay, because I don't know how he does it, because in the past, he never concealed his dislike of something, but somehow he's able to conceal his dislike of Anne. There's no immediate revulsion. Actually, the immediate revulsion does not happen until the wedding night. That's when everything goes down really, really bad. And there's a funny story that Cromwell, who is a serious advisor, and we need to keep that in mind. I mean, he's like trusted advisor to King Henry VIII. Cromwell asked him in the morning, he said, so how you like the Queen? And his response was, quote, I liked her before not well, but now I like her much worse. And in that moment, the king is looking for a way out. The very next day, he says, if it was not to satisfy the world and my kingdom, I would not do what I had to do, which is to marry this earthly thing. So they get married. And at that time, boom, it is revulsion. It is old. He calls her a Flanders mare. This man just all of a sudden turns a switch and cannot stand the sight of Anne of Cleves.
But you know what? And I was looking through my notes. She apparently wasn't aware of this. Anne of Cleves was not aware of this. She, let me see if I can find it. Apparently, when the news comes along that he's trying to divorce her and didn't find her attractive, she's quite surprised by this news. Let's see, but basically, I'm working from memory here. Basically, when her friends came to her and said, well, what did y'all do, at night? And she said, well, he would come in and say goodnight and hold my hand, and then he would leave. And she's like, what more are we supposed to do? and her like friends are like,
exactly. That's how she did it. I mean, she was very, and many people blame her mother. It kind of comes back to her mother, because she just didn't understand a lot of things. She didn't know what was supposed to happen or what not was supposed to happen. I mean, she is now married to a guy who is very sexually active. And it's even rumored that the very next day, that after having spent a night with her, it's like she says something like, do I smell? What is it? What happened here? We've kind of gone different directions. And I don't know, it also might have been that he came across another lady in waiting who just happened to be a lady named Catherine Howard. And maybe that's kind of turned his attention.
But we laugh about her innocence, her naivete, however we want to say it. But in a lot of ways, that protected her. It protected her from the insult. It protected her from the humiliation of the whole thing. Yeah. That I just found the quote. When he would come in, she said, when he comes to bed, he kisses me and taketh me by the hand and biddeth me good night, sweetheart. And in the morning kisses me and biddeth me, farewell, darling. Is this not enough? Isn't that all we need? But the fact that she didn't see anything wrong with this, really probably helped her get through this time when this marriage has not been consummated. The king's now going to turn around and ask for it to be ended, annulled. Yeah. And she's, I guess she's disappointed, but she's not in the position she could have been, is my point there.
Yeah, I think what saves her head is 4 things that the others don't experience. And that is, yes, he dislikes Anne. That's obvious. After this, he says, she's not the one for me. Hey, bad match. We're just not connecting. It would have been a swipe, right? But he finds out a little too late. The other thing is all this foreign policy. Spain and France had kind of been friends. Things were going well. Henry VIII thought, oh no, I'm going to lose some power. I'm going to lose some focus. Next thing you know, they're friends now. So he's like, it's not big of a deal, right? So foreign policy shifts are going on. I think the other thing is he has his eye towards a lady in waiting. Surprise, surprise, there's somebody else. And then the other thing is Thomas Cromwell, who all of a sudden becomes public enemy number 1 and is kind of the person that a lot of people, especially the Catholics, didn't like, because Cromwell's trying to get a Protestant in there. And so everybody starts fussing at Cromwell to the point that King Henry VIII will actually, and I think this is just me, totally off subject, but I really think King Henry VIII and Thomas Cromwell were like best friends. I really think Cromwell and Henry VIII were tight, but power consumed Henry VIII that he didn't really realize what a great friend he had in Cromwell, who protected him from so many things, that Henry VIII will actually kill him. And I think he kills Cromwell because of Anne of Cleves. I think this is the big thing. So Anne of Cleves is saved because of Cromwell, who basically loses his life. Henry VIII instantly regrets it, but you can't take it back once you chop the boy's head off, but I think that happens. And so now you have Henry, who's got to say, okay, all of this has been going on. How can I get annulled? He's already done this once, and it was a pain in the rear to try to do it. So Ray, he has to search. How can I get rid of this wife? And there's a neat little loophole he just so happens to find.
Yeah, he's been down this road before, but the loophole was the marriage was what?
Well, the marriage was fake. It was a fake marriage.
It wasn't a real marriage. Was never consummated. It was a fraud. Now,
that it had not been consummated, but even more so because he knew that he was going to have a hard time with the Catholics with that. But what really got him is they started doing some digging, and they found out that Anne had been previously engaged to a guy whose name was Francis, and there was no proof that the engagement had ended. So therefore, what you have is Henry VIII saying, oh, wait. My marriage was legally invalid from the start because she was technically engaged to another man. Oh, I am so sorry, Anna of Cleves. I shouldn't have done that to you. You need to run off and go and find Francis, and everything needs to be good. I am so sorry. That's his loophole. And yet, here's another twist to Henry VIII, because he finds that loophole, he uses it, and then he's got to convince Anne not to fight it. Because what happens to the other ones who fight it? What happened to Anne Boleyn when she fought it? Lost her head. So what does she decide to do? She says, all right, I'm good with that. That's fine. Hey, can I get like a consolation prize? Is there like going away gifts that I get? Is there anything? And Henry, who is grateful that he doesn't have to fight this and doesn't have to risk possibly, killing the woman, he gives her a generous income. He gives her several homes, actually gives her a home that was to Cromwell, his best friend. He allows her to enjoy her lifestyle. She has, just life. Too much fun she has, because she throws some pretty fancy parties, and she becomes consumed with the English ale. She becomes basically an alcoholic and a gambler. She has all of these big parties at the estate that she has to go. And she basically lives the rest of her life enjoying herself, because she's away from King Henry VIII. She's got her money. She's got her house. She's got everything that she wanted. And it's kind of a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. And you know what? To show that she was actually something of a decent person, when she dies, she provides gifts to everyone who ever served her.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I guess she was a good person. She wasn't really all that interested in this royal thing. She got a good, as you call it, consolation prize, and she was perfectly happy to live out her days there in England and not really worry about it. So,
yeah. And
that's probably what saved her. Because, if you think about, the king has realized she might be, in his mind, an adulteress.
Right.
He could have had her killed at that, but he didn't. So she must have, even though that he didn't find her attractive there, and I'm just speculating here, there must have been something in her he at least admired her at some level or something. Maybe, I don't know.
I think he admired the fact that she said, yes, I'll walk on out.
Yeah.
Here's for the first time, he's got someone that's not going to buck him on this. I didn't enjoy our wedding night either. I'm out of here. See you later. It's fine. Let's just go. But I think money also helped, and homes, and she gets an income of like £3,000 a year, I think is what I read, which made her one of the wealthiest women in all of England. And she kind of enjoys that atmosphere. She enjoys that life. And here's the weird thing. She was only queen for 4 months.
Yeah.
So
she was never crowned. She was never crowned.
Right. And
number two that was never crowned. Because remember, Jane Seymour was never crowned.
Right. And I think what makes it interesting is the beauty of studying the wives of Henry VIII introduce us to these really interesting characters that we probably, no history textbook is going to say, let me tell you about a queen who only lasted 4 months. Yeah. But you and we find a good story and we say, hey, think about this. Look at this. A story of a queen only for 4 months. But man, it's got so much. There's some humor here. For the first time, really, there's a separation between king and a wife that doesn't really cause a lot of drama, murder, death, frustration, all of this. It's just we'll separate. And we'd like to think that he's grown up and he learned some lessons with his love for Jane Seymour, but that's very quickly going to turn around when the lady in waiting, Catherine Howard, comes next for queen number 5.
She's going to be very unfortunate. Well, Chris, another great episode of History You Didn't Know But Should. I hope our listeners enjoyed this episode. Please give us a like on Spotify, leave a comment. You can find us on Facebook. Please share this podcast with your family and friends. Until next time, I'm Ray.
And I'm Chris.
Talk to you later.